You learned to survive a childhood you were supposed to just enjoy, and you've been paying for it ever since. You said, "I'm sorry today for something that wasn't even your fault." You answered, "I'm fine," when you weren't, and you meant it like a reflex. Your stomach dropped when someone said, "Can we talk?" And you spent the next hour replaying everything you might have done wrong. You figure that's just your personality. Easygoing. Low maintenance. But none of that was ever who you are. It was who you learned to be. Back when a kid quietly worked out that staying small was the only way to survive. If that first line already found something tender in you, stick around, maybe subscribe, because we're about to name a thing most people carry their entire lives without ever once seeing it clearly. Because somewhere back there, you stopped being a child who got to be taken care of and became a child who took care not to be a problem. And that quiet switch, the one nobody saw flip, is the whole thread we're about to pull on together. Here's the strange part about survival mode. It doesn't feel like survival. It feels like personality. It feels like being the responsible one, the calm one, the person who notices everything. You don't experience it as fear. You experience it as competence. You're just good at reading people, good at smoothing things over, good at staying 3 steps ahead. And nobody ever told you that this constant low hum of vigilance, this quiet scanning you do without thinking, has a name. It's called hypervigilance. And hypervigilance is exhausting in a way you've stopped noticing, because you've never known anything else. Picture it for a second. Your body is always slightly braced, always half listening for the footstep in the hallway, the change in someone's voice, the shift in the air of a room. You walk into a space and your nervous system takes a reading before you've said a word. Most people don't live like this. You assumed everyone did. They don't. So where, exactly, did you learn it? But this didn't start with you. To understand it, we have to go back to a house, a particular one, the one you grew up in. There was a moment, maybe 1,000 small ones, where a child learned that the safest thing to do was watch. Watch the adult's face. Listen for the tone before the words. Learn which mood meant a normal evening and which mood meant you should disappear into your room. That child wasn't being dramatic. That child was learning to survive. And here's the thing about a child's brain. It doesn't separate "this happens sometimes" from "this is the world." When the people who were supposed to be safe were also the source of unpredictability, the developing nervous system made a logical choice. Stay alert, always. That's not a flaw in you. That's developmental trauma doing exactly what it's designed to do, wiring a small person for a dangerous environment so they make it through. The wiring worked. You're here. But the wiring never got the memo to stop. So now you're an adult, sitting in a perfectly safe room, with no threat anywhere in sight, and your body is still scanning, still bracing, still reading the exits. This is what people miss when they call you anxious or sensitive or too much. You're not broken. You're running a survival program that was installed before you could even spell your own name. And the cruelest part of learned survival isn't the fear itself. It's what it quietly took from you while you weren't looking. Because here's what nobody tallies up. While you were busy surviving, you weren't busy being a kid. The hours other children spent bored, daydreaming, making a mess, falling apart, and being picked back up, you spent those managing, monitoring, keeping the peace. There's a specific grief in that, and most people never let themselves feel it. A lost childhood. Not lost to some dramatic event you could point to, but quietly drained away through emotional neglect so ordinary that you never even questioned it. And there's research that shows just how early this begins. In 1975, a developmental psychologist named Edward Tronick ran what's now called the still face experiment. A mother plays warmly with her baby, then, on cue, goes blank. Flat. Unresponsive. Within seconds, the baby strains to win her back, smiling, reaching, pointing. When nothing works, the baby crumbles. Now imagine that blank face wasn't 2 minutes long. Imagine it was a childhood. A small person, reaching, performing, learning that connection had to be earned. That reaching, that performing, it has an adult name too. It's called the fawn response. When fight isn't safe and flight isn't possible, a child finds a third door, becomes so pleasing, so easy, so attuned to everyone else's needs that you never give anyone a reason to turn away, and it works. So you keep it. You grow up apologizing for things that aren't your fault, saying yes when your whole body means no. People call it kindness. It started as a strategy. There was a person, let's just say a woman, though it could be anyone, who came to realize all this in her 30s. She'd built a life that looked inviolable, dependable, generous, the friend everyone leaned on. But she couldn't rest. Couldn't sit still in a quiet house without her chest tightening. In therapy, she said something that stopped her cold. "I don't know how to feel safe. I only know how to look safe." That sentence was the door. Behind it stood a watchful little girl. And when she finally turned to face that little girl, really looked, she didn't find someone broken. She found someone clever. Someone who'd read every room because reading rooms kept her safe. The relief wasn't in fixing herself. There was nothing to fix. The relief was in understanding, in finally placing the why under decades of self-blame. But understanding the watching is only the first layer, because survival mode doesn't stop at your eyes and ears. It goes deeper, into the body itself. Think about where you actually feel it. Not in your thoughts, in your body. The shallow breath. The jaw that's been clenched since this morning. The shoulders that live somewhere up near your ears. The stomach that knots the second your phone buzzes. This is nervous system dysregulation, and it's not a metaphor. Your body has been holding a position of readiness for so long that the position became the resting state. You don't relax and occasionally tense up. You're tense, and occasionally you almost relax. There's a difference. A big one. Bessel van der Kolk built an entire body of work around one deceptively simple idea. The body keeps the score. Whatever the mind decides to forget, the body remembers anyway, in muscle, in breath, in the reflexes that fire before a single thought arrives. So when someone raises their voice and you flinch before you've even processed the words, that's not weakness. That's memory. Old memory stored somewhere far below language, in a part of you that learned the meaning of a raised voice long before it learned the alphabet. Your body is still keeping that old score. Go back again. Picture the child at the dinner table. To anyone watching, just a kid eating. But underneath, that small body is working overtime, tracking the silence, measuring the gap between words, calculating whether tonight is safe. A child shouldn't have to do that math. But this child did, every single night, until the calculating stopped feeling like effort and started feeling like air. That's how a survival response disappears into a personality. It doesn't announce itself, it just becomes the water you swim in, invisible precisely because it's everywhere. And this is the quiet tragedy of emotional neglect. It leaves no marks you can show anyone. There's no bruise, no broken thing, no story dramatic enough to justify the weight you carry. Just an absence. The hug that didn't come. The question nobody asked. The feeling you had, again and again, of being a guest in your own home. And because nothing happened, you spent years assuming you had no right to struggle. That maybe you were just difficult. The absence was the wound. You just couldn't see a thing that wasn't there. Here's something you can actually do with this today. The next time your body braces, the buzz, the knock, the change in someone's tone, don't try to talk yourself out of it. Instead, place a hand somewhere on your chest or your stomach, wherever the alarm lives, and say quietly, "I see you. We're safe now." It sounds small. It feels almost silly, but you're doing something your nervous system has waited decades for. Someone finally noticing the alarm instead of just obeying it. That's the first thread of reparenting. Because underneath all the vigilance is an attachment story, and it's worth naming plainly. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth spent careers showing that children form a blueprint from their earliest bonds, a working model of whether closeness is safe, whether needs get met, whether people stay. A child met with warmth learns the world holds. A child met with unpredictability learns something colder. Stay ready, trust carefully, depend on no one fully. That's insecure attachment. And it doesn't expire at 18. It walks into your adult relationships wearing your face. So watch what it does to love. You meet someone kind, someone steady, someone who actually stays, and instead of peace, you feel suspicion. Where's the catch? When does it turn? Some part of you keeps waiting for the warmth to curdle, because warmth, in your history, always came with a bill attached. So you brace inside your own relationships. You hold a little back. You stay slightly ready to leave before you can be left, and you wonder why closeness feels less like home and more like a test you're always halfway to failing. This is attachment trauma in motion, and here's the part that stings. You often recreate the very thing that hurt you. You're drawn to the unavailable, the inconsistent, the people who make you work for scraps of affection, because that particular ache feels like recognition. It feels like home, even when home was the wound. Meanwhile, steady love feels boring, suspect, almost unbearable. Not because something's wrong with you, because your nervous system confused intensity with intimacy a long, long time ago, and no one ever taught it the difference. Picture that same child, a little older now, learning the cruelest lesson of all, that love had conditions. Good grades earned warmth. A clean room earned a smile. Being quiet, being useful, being no trouble, that's what kept the connection flowing. So the child became a small engineer of other people's approval, forever calculating the price of being loved. And the bill, once learned, never stops arriving. That's why, as an adult, you still can't quite believe affection is free. You keep reaching for your wallet. You keep waiting to pay. And so you overgive. You become indispensable. You're the one who remembers everyone's birthday, shows up with the right thing, carries more than your share, and calls it love, when underneath, it's often fear wearing love's coat. The fear that if you ever stopped being useful, you'd stop being wanted. This is people pleasing at its root, and it's not generosity, not really. It's insurance, a lifelong premium paid against a childhood terror of being left. But there's a cost to running that policy for 30 years, and it's a cost you pay alone in private. The cost is this: somewhere under all that giving, you went quiet. Not your voice, your inner voice. Ask yourself a plain question and watch what happens. What do you actually want? Not what works for everyone, not what keeps the peace. What do you want? And if the answer comes back blurry or doesn't come at all, that's not a personal failing. It's a skill you were never allowed to build. A child too busy reading everyone else never got the room to find out who they were underneath all that watching. That's the hidden tax of learned survival nobody warns you about. You can spend decades so fluent in other people's needs that your own become a foreign language. You feel numb when someone asks what you'd like for dinner, for your birthday, for your one short life. You shrug. You say, "I don't mind." And you've called that being easygoing for so long you never noticed it was something closer to absence. The absence of a self that never got invited to the table. But that self didn't die. It just learned to wait. Go back one more time, and this time look gently. There's the child, the watchful one, the fixer, the one who learned to disappear into everyone else's weather. Now notice something you've never let yourself see. That child wasn't weak. That child was brilliant. Faced with a situation no kid should have to manage, they built, from scratch, with no help, a working strategy to stay safe and stay connected. That's not damage. That's genius under impossible conditions. The tragedy isn't that the child failed. It's that the child had to succeed so young. And this is where everything quietly turns. Because once you see the strategy clearly, really see it, you get something the child never had. A choice. The child couldn't choose. Survival isn't optional when you're small and dependent. But you're not small anymore. You're not trapped in that house, reading that face, bracing for that footstep. The threat that built the program is over. It ended years ago. And that means, for the first time, you get to ask a question that was never available to you back then. Do I still need this? Some of it you might keep. The empathy, the attunement, the ability to read a room can be a gift when you're not enslaved to it. But the bracing, the apologizing, the paying for love you already have, those you're allowed to set down. Not all at once. Survival mode doesn't uninstall overnight. It loosens, slowly, as your body collects enough evidence that the danger is genuinely gone. Every time you stay in a safe moment without flinching, you're teaching your nervous system a new sentence. This time, no one's coming. This time, you can rest. Here's a practice for that, and it's more powerful than it sounds. Write a letter, an actual one, on paper, to the child you were at the age the watching began. Don't analyze them. Just tell them what no adult did, that it wasn't their job to manage the room, that they were allowed to be a kid, that you see how hard they worked, and that you're here now, and you're not going anywhere. Read it out loud if you can. The part of you that's been waiting decades to hear it is still listening. Because that's what reparenting actually is. Not fixing a broken thing, but finally giving the inner child the steady presence they reached for and didn't get. You become the calm adult you needed. When the old panic rises, you don't shame it. You answer it. When you catch yourself shrinking, you gently take up space anyway. This is slow work, undramatic, mostly invisible to everyone but you. And it's the realest work there is, building, brick by quiet brick, the felt safety that was missing from the very beginning. And slowly, something you didn't expect starts to happen. You begin to feel things in your body again, not just alarm, but warmth, ease, the strange luxury of a deep breath that doesn't catch halfway. You notice a sunset instead of scanning a face. You let a kind word land instead of deflecting it. These moments feel almost unbearable at first, because safety is unfamiliar territory, and the unfamiliar always reads as threat. But you stay. You let it be good. And every time you do, the old wiring loosens its grip just a little more. This is the part of the healing journey nobody photographs. It's not a breakthrough on a mountaintop. It's 1,000 small moments of choosing self-compassion over the old self-blame. It's catching yourself mid-apology and not finishing it. It's letting someone help and tolerating the discomfort of being cared for. It's sitting in a quiet house and, for once, not bracing. None of it looks like much from the outside. But inside, it's nothing short of a revolution, a person learning, decade late, that they were always allowed to simply exist. And here's what you discover at the center of all that quiet work. The vigilance, the fawning, the overgiving, the numbness, none of it was ever the real you. It was the language you learned to speak in a place that didn't speak love clearly. It was a costume worn so long you mistook it for skin. But underneath the survivor, the watcher, the fixer, there's someone who was there before all of it, before you learned to brace, before you learned to earn, before you learned to earn, before you learned to disappear. And that someone has been waiting, patiently, this whole time. So the next time you catch your body bracing for a danger that isn't there, try something radical. Don't fight it, and don't obey it either. Just notice it with something like tenderness. That bracing kept a small child alive once. It earned its place. You're not trying to kill the old guard. You're relieving it of a duty it's carried far too long. You can say simply, "Thank you, I've got it from here," and mean it. Because the watch is finally, genuinely over. You were never too sensitive, never too much, never too broken to be loved without a reason. You were a child who adapted, beautifully, and at great cost, to a world that asked too much too soon. And the most radical thing you'll ever do isn't becoming someone new. It's becoming whole, returning to the someone you were before survival rewrote you. That person isn't gone. They're closer than you think. And in a moment, we're going to talk about how to finally let them come home. So let's bring this home, gently, the way it should have been done a long time ago. If you felt something loosen while listening, something you didn't have words for until now, I want you to sit with it instead of rushing past it. That feeling is recognition. It's the part of you that's been carrying this alone, finally hearing that it makes sense. So let me ask you something, and let yourself answer honestly. When did you first learn that staying alert was safer than staying soft? Who was in the room? And what would it mean to tell that child, now, that the watching can stop? These aren't questions to solve tonight. They're questions to live with, to turn over slowly, with the kind of patience nobody gave you back then. Some you'll answer in a journal. Some you'll answer in tears you didn't expect. Some you'll answer simply by noticing, tomorrow, the moment your body braces and choosing not to brace alone. And here's something I'd love you to do, right now, before you go. In the comments, leave one word, just one, that describes the child you used to be. Not who you became to survive. The one underneath. Watchful, tired, hopeful. Whatever word rises first. Write it down where others can see it, because there's something quietly healing about 1,000 grown adults naming those children out loud, together, in one place. Thank you for staying to the end of this. Not as a formality. I mean it. You gave your attention to something most people spend their whole lives avoiding, and that takes a particular kind of courage. The fact that you sat with this discomfort instead of fleeing it tells me the healing has already, quietly, begun. Because here's the truth no one ever handed you. You never needed anyone's permission to exist fully, to take up space, to rest. That license was always yours. It just got lost in a house that forgot to give it. You can stop apologizing now. You were never the thing that needed forgiving. If this gave words to something you've carried quietly, there's more of this work here whenever you're ready. No rush, no pressure. Just a place that speaks the language you've been learning to translate, waiting for you when you come back. And yet, even as you give yourself that permission, something in you might not believe it yet, because you can know, with your whole mind, that you're safe now. And still, the moment a voice climbs just a little too loud, your whole body drops back into a room you thought you'd left. The understanding doesn't reach the flinch. Not yet. There's a reason that old reflex still fires faster than your thoughts can catch it. A reason buried deeper than memory goes. That part of you remembers something you don't.